then be able to use their data in meaningful ways, leveraging Alteryx and Tableau. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction about continuous technologies, and then I'm going to jump into our use case, give you a brief introduction of what that's going to look like, and then follow up with what we're going to need in order to make this use case happen. And I'll go into the process in Alteryx Designer and give you a demonstration, really dive into what Alteryx Designer is, a brief overview of a lot of tools that we'll be using, and then also I'll be walking through some really cool things that you can do with Alteryx that also make your life a lot easier, like making analytical apps, scheduling Alteryx workflow, things like that. And then finally, I'll just finish with some key takeaways here. So a little bit about continuous technologies. We were established in 2011. Our CEO, Matt Moser, started just as himself, and he's grown the business to around 30 consultants. And ever since then, we're still serving our very first customer. We really ultimately are just data experts. We really focus in on your data, and we like to use your data to drive better decisions and allow you to be able to use your data as well, whether that be in Alteryx, Tableau, Power BI. We have a large knowledge base across all of our consultants. We are based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We do have consultants across the United States, and we do serve clients nationally and internationally as well. So with that, just a brief introduction, I'll jump right into our use case here. So I'm going to be giving you a hypothetical situation of managing a supply chain process for a pharmaceutical company. So we know here that certain temperatures at our farm company are sensitive to extreme temperatures, and they could potentially be at risk from the time it's shipped from our warehouse to once it actually reaches our customer storefront. So what we want to know here is what shipments are at risk, what shipments are at risk. And what we're going to do is we're going to define shipments are at risk if they are in transit on days with temps greater than a specified threshold, as well as they're being shipped to customer storefronts outside of a 2-hour drive time from our affected shipping location. We're gonna, in this example, we're gonna use a 70-degree threshold. So if our customer order is being shipped on a day that's greater than 70 degrees and it's being shipped to a customer 2 hours away, we're gonna say that's gonna be an at-risk product. Ultimately, what we're gonna wanna do is be able to have our business analysts actually define those specific thresholds on their own, and I'll show you how to do that within Alteryx. Not only do we wanna know what shipments are at risk, but we also wanna know what that potential financial impact will be. So if these shipments are actually compromised, how much is this going to cost us as a business? And is there any way that we can do some cost benefit analysis and actually mitigate some of that risk? So with that, sorry, my computer is being a little funky here. I will jump into our visualization here because I really think that it gives you a really great view of where we want to be at our ultimate end goal from our Alteryx workflow. There's a variety of different ways that we can actually output what we want to know, but I think the Tableau visualization actually gives it a really good, gives you a really good idea. So if your organization does not use Tableau, you can also output to Excel, PDF, just a regular Hyper, and I'll show you how to do that once we get through that Alteryx workflow. So here is the Tableau visualization. So up at the top left, you can see you have right away, September 16th, we know that we have $2.6 million worth of at-risk product, meaning our customers that are 2 hours away are going to be affected because today it's greater than 70 degrees. So if we hover over this, this visual, it really drives the rest of the visual. If it'll work here. There we go. So you can see September 16th, it's 84 degrees. So that's above our temperature threshold. So any customers that you see outside of that gray area, these ones are going to be customers that are at risk. This gray area represents our 2-hour drive time. And then you can't really visualize here because there's a lot of customers within, but at the center of this trade area is our shipping facility, which we are assuming is in St. Louis. And then over on the right here is where you can really do a good analysis of what's going on. You can see on each day what customer orders are being shipped out and which ones are affected and what is that financial dollar amount. So as you can see, customer 151 has $814,000 of potential at-risk product. So maybe you'd want to put that product on like a truck with better air quality, air conditioning, and then that would mitigate that risk as you're shipping those products out. So now that we kind of know where we're going to end up, I'll dive into the data that we need and also how we're going to leverage that using Alteryx. So the data that we need, we ultimately need 3 main points of input. So we need our shipping information, order information, and our temperature, our forecast for those next 7 days. So shipping, we need, where's our shipping location? Here we're assuming it's in St. Louis. We ultimately then need to define that trade area or that gray blob, for lack of a better terminology, on that Tableau visualization. We also need the order information. So where are our shipments being shipped to? Where are our customers located? On what day are those being shipped out? And what is that financial dollar amount? So we can do that cost benefit analysis there. And then finally, we just need our temperature, our 7-day forecast, so we can match up what is the temperature on each day our customers are being shipped their products. So once we have those 3 pieces of information, then we get into how are we going to do this leveraging Alteryx. So first, we're going to use Alteryx to blend our shipping facility information and our order data off of our SQL database. We're also going to get our forecast data from the Dark Sky API, and we're going to be using a custom macro. So the Dark Sky API, the Dark Sky is essentially just another weather channel app that you're able to get all of your weather information, and they actually open up an API so we can pull our forecast information programmatically from their website. And then we're going to be doing that using a custom macro. So I'll explain a little bit in further detail what exactly that means, but essentially it allows you to create one tool with a bunch of Alteryx tools behind the scenes, and allows you to share that one tool within your organization. So although we're using this custom macro within this shipping weather analysis, we could also use it with any other analysis we would need forecast information. We're also going to integrate our data. So we're going to publish this directly to Tableau server. So as you saw, I had my Tableau workbook sitting up on Tableau server. And what's going on behind the scenes there is my Alteryx workflow is running directly into my Tableau server. And all I really have to do is press refresh on that workbook. And like I mentioned, I will show a variety of different ways of how to output your data if Tableau isn't something that is used at your organization. And then finally, we're going to deploy and automate. So we're going to make it an analytical app. So what this essentially means is we're going to allow those end users and business analysts to define those specific thresholds of what is an at-risk product. They'll be able to go into the workflow, change the temperature, and change the drive time if they so please, depending on how sensitive their medication is to the temperature and the drive time. We're also going to deploy this workflow to Alteryx Gallery. The benefit of this is it allows my Alteryx workflow that I built to be used across the organization, regardless of whether our analysts have Alteryx Designer sitting on our desktop. So it's really nice because it makes it really scalable across your organization. Lastly, then we're going to schedule a workflow. We can schedule a workflow right in Alteryx Gallery. So if we have daily meetings where we need this information, we can go ahead and just schedule that every morning, 8 a.m. So it's ready for us in our 8:30 meeting, and it's ready for us to analyze and make those business decisions off of. So now that we've gone through the data that we need and how we're going to do that, I think I'm going to jump right into the Alteryx demonstration. But before that, I'll stop here to see if anyone has any questions based off of our process or based off of anything that I've said just now. All right, awesome. So this is Alteryx Designer for anyone who hasn't seen it before. You can see there's our white canvas that's holding all of our tool containers and all of our specific tools. You can also see there is a lot of documentation that's going on within this Alteryx workflow. And that's really because it's kind of twofold for me. One, it makes your workflow auditable. So you're able to see exactly what's going on with your data as it's moving through your workflow. And two, just as at Continuous, just as a consultant, as best practice, we really like to, if we're helping one of our clients build a workflow, we really like to document what's going on in each step, what each tool is doing. So once this workflow is then passed on to that client, they're able to pick it up very quickly and really understand what's going on behind the scenes here. So it makes it really easy to maintain once you have that really good documentation. As you can see up here, this is where all of our Alteryx tools are going to be. It's really nice because it's all split out categorically. So if you know for a fact that you need to start preparing your data, doing any data cleansing, deleting any fields that you may not need, you can go up in this preparation section and really just drag and drop any tool that you may need and configure it over here. One of the nice things that I really like about Alteryx is it also gives you the opportunity to favorite any tools that you need or any tools that you use very frequently. So for example, the select tool is, as you'll see in this workflow especially, it's probably the most commonly used tools because it has a lot of functionality. So that tool is right there directly in my favorites favorite section, and I can go in there and grab that tool very easily. So that's just a quick overview of what Alteryx Designer looks like. So I'm just going to zoom in here so we can get into the details of the workflow. As a reminder, we do have our first step, just as a reminder, our first step is to gather our customer information. So if we think back to this Tableau visualization, we need to figure out where all of these blue dots are on a map. And so what we need is we really need our customer order information, the day it's being shipped, and where exactly, like a point in space of where exactly this is. So we're going to go ahead and get this data from our SQL database, as I mentioned. We're going to use the OLDB connection, and then we're just going to select our entire demo customer order table. So I'm going to pop this open just so you can see a little bit what this looks like. One of the nice things about Alteryx is it's really designed, it really helps people who don't have a super technical background. So if you don't really know SQL script, then you can go in here and there's this really nice visual query builder where you can go in, select any fields you may need from your database. And if you do have a more technical background, you're more than welcome to just come in here, write your SQL, test your script, and then run that input tool. So once this is inputted, we have our SQL script in there. You can see down in the bottom, Alteryx has a really nice preview of what your data looks like. So here we really almost have all of the information we need. We have our address, city, state, zip, ship date, and order amount. But ultimately what we need here is going to be that like point in space to tell Alteryx and Tableau, where is this actually located? So we need to sort of put all of these points of information in one tool to get that point in space where Tableau can actually put that point on a map. In order to do that, we can use Alteryx's Street Geocoder tool. And essentially what this is doing is you just have to put in all of your geography information, so address, city, state, and zip, and you can output a lot of really great spatial information. Here we only need a spatial object, which again is really, for lack of a better terms, is really just that point in space that tells these tools where this location actually is. Later on, I'll also pull in latitude and longitude because we'll also need that once we are trying to pull our forecast information from the Dark Sky API. So now that we have our point in space, we almost have all of our data ready to go to be merged in with our shipping data. But first, what we want to do is clean up our data a little bit. As I mentioned, the select tool is one of my most used tools just because it has a lot of functionality. You can deselect any fields you may no longer need. You can change the data type. As you can see, we changed our ship date to be an actual date data type. And you can also rename any of your fields that you may need. So later on in the workflow in step 2, we're also going to be pulling in our shipping address, city, state, and zip. So we just want to be really clear what fields we're pulling in before we join that data, because it can get a little confusing if you join too many addresses together and you aren't clear exactly what those addresses are. And then finally, we just want to add a unique customer ID to each customer. So this record ID tool is really just going to do that. It's going to add a unique record to each customer, and then starting at 1 and going down sequentially. Then we're just going to leave the rest of the default options as normal. We can leave that in the first column. That should be fine there. So coming out of step 1, if we think back to that Tableau visualization, we now have all of these customer points. We have their order amounts. The next thing that we need to do is we need to define the point in space for our shipping facility. So as I mentioned, we're going to assume that our shipping facility is in St. Louis. So we just need to go ahead and grab that. Similar to our customer information, in step 2, we're going to grab that shipping location from our SQL database using that OLDB connection. We're selecting our entire demo store table. And as you can see in our preview, this ultimately pulls out 2 shipping locations. So this is really just to show that you could really do this analysis on as many shipping warehouses as you have. So if you have like 10 warehouses, you could do this same analysis, but for the simplicity of this example, we're just going to focus in on this St. Louis example. And in order to do that, in order to filter out that Florence location, we're going to use the sample tool. The sample tool is really good for modeling because you can select and sample a variety of different ways. You can configure it very differently and even group by your fields. However, for this example, just very simple, we just want to grab our last 1 row. One thing that's also cool about Alteryx is because one designer of a workflow may do it one way, there's also like multiple ways to do the same task. So here our task was just to output that St. Louis location, but we use the sample tool. We can also use the filter tool, and really we get the job done the same way. So just to kind of show you how Alteryx works connecting these tools, you can just drag and drop our filter tool down here, connect your input to your filter. And so as we know, we only want our St. Louis location. So you do ID equals to 2, run that through, and what's going to come out of our true section is going to be our St. Louis location. What's going to come out of our false section will be our Florence location. So although we use the sample tool to get the St. Louis location, we can also use the filter tool and really ultimately end up with that same result. So similar to what we did for our customer information, we also need to get that point in space for our shipping location. Not only do we need that point in space, but we also want that latitude and longitude because that's going to be our input into our dark sky API, which that's going to be a little bit more clear once we get to that step of the workflow. But just because we know we're well aware we need latitude and longitude, we're just going to go ahead and bring that in right away. And then again, we're just going to use the select tool, clean up our data a little bit, rename some of our fields just so we're super clear on what we're looking at. So coming out of step 2, we now have our customer points, we have our shipping point, but now we ultimately need this gray trade area. One of the nice things about Alteryx is it has really great spatial capabilities. So you initially think like that is going to require a lot of tools, it's going to require a lot of work on our part just to get that trade area. But since Alteryx has a lot of really great spatial tools, we can get all of that trade area just in one tool. And that tool is going to be the trade area one. And ultimately, it's really easy to configure. We just say that our shipping spatial object point is going to be our point of reference. And we want to define a 2-hour drive time in minutes. So define that trade area, a 2-hour drive time. We can also configure it to be the radius or kilometers. And ultimately what it's doing is it's using the TomTom US off-peak dataset behind the scenes. So that's really similar to like what you would have on your GPS on your phone. Instead of just defining your point from point A to point B, you're defining really every possible point in a 2-hour drive time from point A. So it just takes one tool to get that trade area, and then we can use our select tool, clean up our data just a little bit more, and we now have, from our Tableau visualization, this gray trade area that Tableau can pick up and read. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to define what customers are within this trade area and what customers are outside of this trade area. So again, with Alteryx really great spatial tools, it takes just one tool to do that. this is going to be our spatial match tool. And what we want to do and how we configure this is we're saying, what is our target point? So our target point is our customer points. So where our target is within universe, within our shipping facility trade area, let's call that a match. So what that does is everything that's coming out of the upper right-hand arrow is going to be all of our customer orders that are within that shipping trade area. And then again, what's coming out of the bottom right, so it doesn't just filter out any of the customers that aren't in there. It's just going to say those aren't a match. We're going to filter those out to the bottom right arrow. One of the nice things about some of the tools within Alteryx is you have different functionality of other tools built into one tool. So although this is a spatial match tool, it also has that select tool functionality built into it. So had we not renamed our fields coming into this tool, if we came in, configured this tool, and we saw that we had 2 addresses, we could go in here and just rename customer address right then and there, and then we'd be set to go with very clear and clean data. So now we have 2 streams of data, essentially. We have a stream that says these customers are within our trade area, these customers are outside of our trade area. So what we want to do is just add an additional field to just define that. So we're going to use our formula tool, and what this does is it just adds another field to the right that says all of these customers are within, just defines that there. And likewise, we want to do that with our all of our customers that are outside that trade area. After this step, we don't need our data set in two data sets anymore. So here we still have 2 streams of data. We ultimately want to bring these back together. We want to stack one on top of the other. So we use the union tool in order to do that. And what this is going to do, most of the time you don't even really have to configure this tool. It can auto configure by name. So what it's going to do is it's going to configure this top data set with this top data set, stack them on top of each other. And it's knowing how to stack them based off of the field names up here on top. So now that we had 83 records coming out of both of these streams, once we use the union tool, we now have 166 records. Again, just cleaning up some of our data. We no longer need our shipping facility information other than our spatial point. So coming out of step 4, we almost have all of the information that we need. We have the trade area, we have defined all of the customers that are outside of this trade area, all the customers that are inside the trade area. We almost have our at-risk products defined. The last piece of information that we need is really our forecast information. So that it's going to tell us what order is going to be at risk if it's being shipped greater than 70 degrees. So in order to do that, like I mentioned, we're going to use the Dark Sky API, which again is just another way to get your weather, but they open up their API, which allows you to pull all of that forecast information programmatically. We won't have to go in manually and enter in the 7-day forecast. This Dark Sky API allows us to do that. This tool is actually a custom macro, which is really just a bunch of tools working behind the scenes to get that forecast information. So if you look at what's coming into the tool, it's this latitude and longitude that's really defining the forecast that should come out. So for St. Louis. So if we take a look at what this looks like behind the scenes, you just right click on your macro and you press open macro. And you can see here that these are all of the tools that are really behind the scenes of this Dark Sky API macro. What it's doing is it's hitting the API, cleaning, parsing, doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and then just spitting out all of that rich forecast information. So as you can see here, we have a lot of forecast information for St. Louis. Most of this information we probably don't need, but again, this custom macro is really nice because although we're using it in this workflow, we can also drop this macro in another weather analysis workflow that we have, and maybe we would need other information outside of the temperature high for that day. So the custom macro is really nice because it allows you to share it with others throughout your organization. Once we have all of that forecast information, we do want to clean up our data just a little bit, because as you can see here, we have our relative day. We don't actually have a date here. We're ultimately going to need a date just so that we can marry that information up with our customer information. So in order to do that, we're just going to use another formula tool. We're going to do a date time add, which is essentially saying, let's take the date of today, which is November 16th, add the relative day in days to that. So it's saying relative day 0 is today, and it's going to output the actual date that you will need instead of that relative day. Similarly, we're also going to do the time of high. So it's going to be another date time add, and it's really just the amount of seconds since 1970, January 1st of 1970. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything to us. We really want like the actual time in hours and minutes of when this high is going to be. We're also just going to add another field that's going to label if something's a heat concern. So if the temperature high is greater than 70 degrees, we're going to call that a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0, and a 1 will be labeled a heat concern for that day. And we're also just going to add another field that just defines our temp threshold. So when we run that workflow, whatever we output, that field's going to be in there, so the end user knows exactly what temperature threshold they used for that specific visual or that specific analysis. And then again, using the select tool, cleaning up all the data that you no longer need. We really only need the high, date of high, and that time of high. So coming on to step 5, we now again still have 2 separate sets of data that we want to merge together. Instead of using that union tool, we don't really want to stack our data one on top of each other. We just want to append all of this information to our customer data. So we want this weather to be on all customer order dates that went out on September 16th. We use the join tool in order to do that. So you can see we have our customer on the left, customer information on the left, and then we now have all of our temperature forecast information joined on the right to our data. And then in order to do that, we just joined on specific fields. So we joined again on date. And you can see here, the select tool functionality is also built in within this join tool. So again, we don't need 2 we don't need 2 dates. So we're going to just deselect our right date. And you're able to do that here. So now what we have is really our entire data set ready for analysis. Our final step is to output that data. So as you first saw at the beginning of this demo, I was outputting the data directly to Tableau server. So there's this really nice macro that you can configure that will push all of your data to Tableau server and allow you to go into your Tableau workbook that you've built up, hit refresh, and it'll refresh that live data feed behind the scenes. Another way that you can output your data is through PDF or Excel formats. So if Tableau is not used at your organization, this may be really helpful. And what this is ultimately going to do is we're using some of the reporting tools to make this look to be in like a prettier format. And what this is going to do is just pull out all of your data points here in a nice PDF that you're able to easily tell which shipments are at risk and what is that order amount that's at risk. Likewise, you can do that to Excel. This is going to look the exact same as the PDF, except let's say you want to do some additional analysis in some of this data. The Excel is going to allow you to do that. Another way to output is just to your SQL database. So if you run this every day and you just want to be able to store this history throughout time, you can do that within your SQL database, and it'll push directly using your OLDB connection. And then finally, you can also, let's say this is your first time building your workflow, you have no visualizations built up in your Tableau server. You can also just directly output this to a Tableau hyper extract, and then that way you can open up that hyper and then just start building your Tableau dashboard. So a variety of different ways to output your data, and by no means is this an exhaustive list, but gives you a good idea of how you can use your data once you're done analyzing it or preparing it within Alteryx. So we have this workflow. The last step that not the last step, but one of the last steps that we need is we wanted to make this an analytical app. So we wanted to be able to allow our business analysts to really go into this workflow and define those specific thresholds on their own. So how we do that is we just use Alteryx interface tools. So these interface tools allows you to configure text box or questions around how to make this an analytical app. So we're saying temperature threshold, we're gonna ask what is their temperature threshold? And then they're gonna be able to change it as they please. And what's gonna go on is this interface tool is actually connected down to our formula tool that says, that will change the 70 degrees here. So likewise with the drive time, and we can also input our Tableau server username and password if we are pushing to that Tableau server. What this is ultimately going to look like is this really easy to use user interface where your analysts can go in and then change their temperature threshold, their drive time, say to 100 minutes, change their username and password if need be, and then they'll just press finish. It'll run the workflow behind the scenes, and then your outputs will be updated wherever you have those linked to. So now that the analytical app is set up, the next thing that we'll want to do is just scale this to the rest of the organization. So the problem with this is we have this workflow just sitting on my desktop. If someone needs it to run, they'll need to either have Alteryx Designer and I'll need to package up this workflow, send it to them, or they'll just need to have me run it whenever they need information. So that's why we want to scale this and push this to our Alteryx gallery. In order to do that, you just save your workflow directly to your private gallery, name it however you please, and then once you hit save, this will actually pull this up into your Alteryx gallery here. So looks very easy to run. You can just hit your run button, type in your credentials, if I get these right the first time. It'll validate, and then again, you still have that really easy to use interface where you can just change your temperature threshold, minutes, and your Tableau credentials. It'll run right behind the scenes, so again, your outputs will be ready to go whenever you need them. So if you need to go back to your Tableau server, you can just refresh your workflow after you run it directly in Alteryx Gallery. And then the last thing here is you can also schedule this workflow directly in Alteryx Gallery. So again, if you know you need this analysis every Monday morning, you can have that run right before your 8:30 meeting and your data is ready for you sitting in Tableau server if that's what you're using. So with that, I'll just go back here just to give you a key takeaways. So as you could see, it's speed to market very fast. So it takes the most time-consuming part of your analysis from weeks to hours, if not minutes. The workflow that was just built runs in probably 2 minutes, and then I'm able to refresh that Tableau workbook, and I have my analysis done in less than 5 minutes. Building the Alteryx workflow will take, the Alteryx workflow that was just built did not take that much time, and it really just changed that analysis to be very quick. It's really easy to use, so it empowers the line of business analysts to ask and answer their own questions. So once we've deployed that to Alteryx Gallery, we've made that an analytical app. It allows your business analysts to type in their own thresholds, run that workflow, and do that analysis all within their own day and with their own schedule. It doesn't rely on anyone else to provide those reports to them. It's also really easy to maintain. As you saw, there was no custom code. It was really just that drag and drop interface. There was a lot of documentation behind it. And it was just really easy. If you need to go and update any tools, it's really easy to do so. Also, the scalability of Alteryx is really great. You can take the insight built by me and share it with anyone at your organization that may need it, whether they have Alteryx Designer on their desktop or not. As long as that's deployed in Alteryx Gallery, anyone at your organization is able to use that. And lastly, super great integration. So as you saw, I just ran my inputs, my workflow directly into Tableau server, and that data set was just sitting on Tableau server my Tableau workbook was already connected to that data set. So really all I had to do was press refresh. So the integration between Alteryx and Tableau is really nice. Even if Tableau isn't something that's used, there are just so many different ways that you can output your data within PDF, Excel, just a regular Hyper. There's just a lot of ways that you can output your data and use it in a way that's friendly for your users. So I think with that, I'll open up to any questions that anyone may have. Awesome. All right, well, if nobody has any questions, Addie, I don't know if you have any final comments or anything else to say, but this PowerPoint, we can share this PowerPoint, I'm assuming, and also here's our contact information if you need to reach out with any other questions after this.
Thanks, Jillian. We did have one question from Anne who asked if the webinar would be shared later. We did record it. We'll see if it worked on my end. I was having some Zoom issues, but we'll see what we can do there. Otherwise, we'll figure something out and find a way to share the content with everyone. If everyone is good to go, thank you, Jillian. That was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Feel free to get in touch with us directly. We have contact forms on our websites. Otherwise, we're on social media, so you can shoot us a message there. But thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, Addie.
Yep.